Mauthausen and go to people's houses?
Everybody went outside.
Did you go to German houses, or?
We went everywhere they could, but mostly we were helped by, they were already, I suppose, details of soldiers or from the UNRWA or from these organizations that knew what was happening, and they were there, to assist and help all these people, all these people that were liberated from all these different countries, from Russia, from Hungary, from the Czech Republic, from different places.
Right.
Everybody was looking to make their way back to where we came from.
But where did you spend the first couple of days after you were liberated?
I was in a school, and with a group of other people from that area from where I came, not from my village, but from the area where I came from.
Right.
Like from Munkac.
Were there nurses in the school, or were there doctors, or?
There were doctors, and there were also nurses, but we didn't know who was who. But we just knew that there were people there looking to help us.
Did you have your own bed there?
They didn't assign you to a bed. You slept wherever you found a place to sleep. You slept.
Right.
But it was no restrictions, no rules. You were liberated, and you were free to do what you wanted. You were free to go wherever you wanted. And you were classified as a displaced person. You could ride the buses, the trains, and you got on anywhere you wanted, and nobody bothered you.
I mean, did you have typhus, or were you sick, or?
No.
You didn't have any?
I didn't have any diseases, no typhus, no nothing. And the first time I remember in school, I was able to bathe, and I got up next morning and I ate some food, and I started to ask questions, amongst the people that were liberated, if anybody is going, where they're going and where they're heading. And a lot of them were saying they're going to Budapest. So I just joined the group.
Now, but
I'm going with you.
Did this take a couple of days, or did this take many weeks?
It took days. Within days, everybody was very anxious to return, to find somebody that survived from their families.
You mean
to see immediately? You couldn't wait for next morning to come, so you could get going.
I mean, it only took you a few days? It didn't take you months to recover?
No, it took us, by the time, we recovered every day, but it took us immediately, starting maybe in a day or two, to starting to find ways to start going back to where you come from. And they told us not to travel by yourself. So we traveled in groups. So the first group that I joined was going to Hungary, to Budapest.
Oh, okay.
That's where I found a cousin. A cousin of mine found me.
Which cousin?
His name was Itzik or Irving.
And which side of the family was he from?
My first cousin. His father and my father were brothers.
What was his father's name?
Schleimer.
Right. What did he do for a living, Schleimer?
He was a furrier in the United States. He worked in the fur business.
So Schleimer was already in America?
Yeah, he was here before the war.
Oh.
He was my father's brother.
But why didn't he bring...
His son and his daughter?
Yeah.
His daughter died in a concentration camp, and his son survived, and eventually brought him here after the war. But when he came to the United States, he came by himself before the war.
Right.
You have it on your tape there.
Right, yeah. Okay. So how did you meet him?
He met me. I was in a school in Hungary, and we were sort of, they were the Hayas and the United Jewish Appeal and the UNRWA had stations where all these people went to. We were being fed, we were given money, we were sort of given instruction, assistance, how to go back where you come from. You're being interviewed. And anyway, I was laying on the floor there on a mattress. They had a lot of mattresses in this schoolhouse. They didn't have beds for everybody. So I was laying on the floor on the mattress, and as a matter of fact, I just came back from lunch, wherever they fed us lunch. And
how long after the war was this?
That was, I don't know, maybe a month or so,
right.
Or maybe 6 weeks. I don't know exactly of the date. And I was already out of the American zone. I was in the Russian zone already.
Right.
In that part of Hungary, in Budapest. The Russians were there.
Right.
And I was laying there with others, we were not, we were already very well fed, we had clothes, we were They even gave me a watch. And I heard somebody coming through the barracks and calling out, like not only him, a lot of other guys kept coming from work brigades. People kept looking for relatives and family. And they were family, a lot of people that found family right there in the barracks. They found people that came in and they found each other.
Right.
Sometimes brothers, sometimes a father found a son. But I heard somebody coming down in the middle of the aisle, and he kept calling out, and it says, in Yiddish, he kept saying, is anybody here from Batsheva? And he kept coming down closer and closer to me, and I sort of put my head down. I couldn't imagine. But when he came very close, and he said again, you know, is there anybody here from Batsheva? So I sort of raised myself up, and I recognized him.
Really?
And I recognized him, and I says, yes. I told him in Yiddish, ja, ich bin from Batsheva. So he came close to me, and he picked me up, and he says to me, in Yiddish, he says to me, Ber Leiser. And I looked at him, and I says, Itzik. And we both started to cry. And he was in the partisans. He was originally in a slave labor camp.
Right.
But he escaped from there, and he joined the partisans, and he was with Yugoslavia, with Tito.
Right.
And he was 10 years older than me. My wife is here helping me.
Right.
And he came, and he wore a Russian uniform, and, you know, one of those shirts that goes over the pants.
Right.
And a cap with a red star on it. And he was a partisan. And he looked like he was a very healthy, strong young man. And he started to ask me questions about his sister, about his mother that didn't survive.
Right. Did you know the answers?
Well, we knew that when they were taken,
Right.
and I didn't know if they survived or not,
Right.
you know, but later on we found out that they didn't.
Right.
And I asked him, does he know of anybody, you know, or my family, you know, we kept asking each other, but he told me, you know, right then and there, that two of my uncles survived the camps.
Right.
On my father's side.
Right.
One came with the Czech army from Russia, and one was liberated in a slave labor camp.
Right. Who were they?
Meyer, Martin, and Herman. Meyer and Suraj, they both went to Israel.
Right.
And their families, though, their first families, you know, each one of them had a wife and a child, and their wife and kids were also killed in the concentration camp.
Right. Do you ever remember after you were liberated going into German houses and getting clothing, or?
I did.
You did. Yeah. So okay. And what kind of things did you get in there?
I didn't do it by myself, but I went in with maybe 4 or 5 other guys. We went in and we took whatever we wanted. We just took it. We took the house apart. We did whatever we wanted.
Well, what did you get?
I don't know. I know a few of the guys. They had acquired weapons with me, and we went in and we took whatever we wanted. Nobody tried to stop us.
Oh, there were people in the house?
Yeah, there were people in the house too.
Oh, and you had weapons.
Women. Never seen a man in the house. Oh,
women. Just women?
Yeah.
And were they very scared?
I suppose they were. They must have known what the Germans did to us.
And what kind of things did you take? Did you take food or clothing, or?
I didn't need any food. I just took some clothing.
Right.
We had more food than them at this point.
Right. Okay. I mean, did you get anything after the war that was pretty elaborate? Like, that was kind of unusual, or no?
No.
No. Did you get new shoes and?
I got new shoes, new clothes. I got whatever I wanted. I got better clothes than I had before the war. But, we weren't looking for anything. The only thing we were looking is for people that survived, like family, really that survived. I was looking, for my, I don't know who. I know my brother, David, he was younger than me. He couldn't have survived. But I figured maybe my aunts or some uncles. I knew that later on I found out that my 2 uncles survived in Europe, which incidentally, when I went back to Batsheva, I went to live with them.
Right.
They took me to live with them.
Right. So what happened after you met your cousin? Where did you?
Well, he told me, what was happening, and then he just, he took me with him. He wouldn't leave me, and he took me all the way back to Batsheva.
How did you travel?
By train.
Was this in a cattle train or a passenger?
No, we went into the passenger car. You know, he was a very important person.
Right. I mean, did he have money with him? And
he had money. He had a weapon. He had papers from the Russians.
Oh, okay. So was he underfed, or was he?
Was he what?
Was he skinny like you were?
No, he wasn't skinny.
No, so he
was very healthy.
Right.
He was a healthy specimen. He was a strong man.
Right. And how? What kind of age difference was there between you?
10 years. He's 10 years older than me.
Right. And how long did it take to get back to Bakshava?
Oh, a few days.
Right. Did you sleep on the train?
Yes, we slept. Well, it didn't take very long. From Budapest to Bakshava, you know, by train is not that long a trip. That whole country is not big.
And were the trains filled with refugees?
There were refugees all over. Everywhere you turned, there were people going somewhere, looking for somebody.
Right.
It was like people were lost souls. There were travelers everywhere. People were going in every direction.
Right. So what happened when you arrived in Bakshava?
Well, when I arrived in Bakshava, you know, and we had approximately 30 Jewish families there, and I found maybe a dozen young kids like my age and maybe a couple of years older that survived and came home, and we all congregated in one house. And we were told not to walk by ourselves at night or go out on the streets alone, because we were told that it wasn't safe.
Right.
That some of those people, you know, like the Ukrainians or those people, thought that maybe you come back to look for your property. And they weren't happy about that.
Now, do you still remember the names of any of the people that came back?
Yeah, well, yes, I remember some. But
what were some of the names?
It was Sura, Malka, Heshvigdar, all you were Jewish people.
Right. And were any of them good friends of yours before the war?
We were all, the whole village, and I thought all the Jewish people were very friendly to each other. We were friends and family. And
did any old people come back?
No, I didn't see a single old person that came back. Some survived the labor camp. Later on, I found that, you know, but I moved away from Bakshava. I moved to Minkaj, which was a city close to Bakshava, and I lived with my uncles, 2 uncles. And from there, you know...
Oh, did you go back into your house?
I went back to the house, but there was nothing there. I'll tell you an interesting story. I was able to sell my house. Well, nobody was living there. And one of our neighbors came and he bought my house from me.
How much did he pay you?
I think he paid me in Hungarian money, like maybe 20,000 or 25,000 pangyos,
right,
or whatever it was. But my Uncle Martin was there with me, and he made the deal.
And how much below the market was that?
I don't have the biggest. He offered, we took the offer, he prepared the paper, and I signed it, and that was the end of it. That was the last I've seen him, the last I've seen the house, the last I've seen... What? Yeah, and we had a dog, and Mom says that, my wife says that the dog recognized me.
Really, the dog?
Yeah, we had a dog before the war.
And the dog was still there?
Yeah, one of the neighbors had the dog.
Do you remember the dog's name?
Yeah, his name was Riga.
Riga?
Yeah, but he was a shepherd, an old dog.
What, was it a German shepherd?
I think so.
What color was it?
It was brown.
Right. And he recognized you?
Yes.
Right. So he must have been pretty happy to see you.
Well, first when I walked into the yard, you know, he was barking and growling, but, you know, I kept walking closer to him because I wasn't afraid of him.
Right.
And when I got close to him, you know, he started to whimper.
Right. Yeah, okay. Now, were you able to get any photographs in the house?
No. I was able to, but I had no camera to take photographs.
No, I mean, were there any pictures? Could you find any pictures from before the war?
I didn't find anything.
No?
Nothing at all.
And was the house totally stripped of anything?
There was nothing in there. Not that we had so much in it. We didn't have much, but it was completely empty.
Right.
And nobody was living in it.
Do you remember the name of the person that bought it from you?
That's a very hard question to remember.
Right, okay.
I couldn't tell you his last name.
Do you remember what he did for a living, that man?
He was a farmer.
Right. Did you know him well before the war?
Yes, very well. My father and him were friendly.
Oh,
As a matter of fact, we didn't have any enemies in the village anyway before the war. Everybody got along and everybody was poor.
Right. Okay. And so, was the money he gave you, was that a lot of money?
No.
No?
No. It wasn't a lot of money. It was very...
Okay.
It wasn't not much of a house either. It wasn't like you see these houses.
Right. And so how long did you stay there for?
In Bacheva?
Yeah, in Bacheva.
I think 2 or 3 days.
Okay. And then where did you go?
To Minkaj.
How did you get there? By train?
No, there was no train. I got there with a horse and wagon, in a wagon.
And you went with your uncles, or?
I went with my uncles.
Okay. And what did you do in Munkash?
Well, my uncle, before the war, he was married to a rich woman, before to Mordechai Shmuel. And
Right.
they had a bar and restaurant before the war. And my other uncle, Sruhesh, he was an officer in the Czech army. And, we stayed there maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks in Minkaj, and from there we went to Sudetenland with them because my uncle, my father's brother, the Czechs retaliated against the Nazis, and they gave German farms in the Sudetenland to the Czech soldiers that came from Russia with this General Svoboda.
Right.
And they gave him a German farm in the Sudetenland, in Podbojan.
Right.
And we all went there to live on that farm.
Now, weren't you still looking for members of your family? What did you do to try to find people? Did you put
we knew more or less already with my 2 uncles. They knew, who survived and who didn't survive, and we didn't.
Were you putting your name on lists? Were there places to put your name?
Well, we put our names in the schools, or the name of your own name and the town you come from, and but once we got to the village and we found the people, that were still living, that we more or less knew already that the rest of them are not coming back.
Right.
There had to be a good many months, maybe 3-4 months after liberation, possibly 5 months.
Right. Okay, so then you said you went to a farm, did you say?
Then we went to a farm in the Sudetenland, which was the Czech Republic.
Right.
If you remember, when World War II started, the Nazis, the first thing they did is invaded Czechoslovakia and took the Sudetenland.
Right.
And then they took the Rhine from France. That's how he started, Hitler.
Right.
And so all these Nazis that were in Sudetenland, the Czechs, retaliated against them and took away their properties from the Germans and gave them to the Czech soldiers that fought in World War II with the Czech army.
Right.
So my uncle received a farm, a beautiful big farm. And we went there and we lived there. And the Nazis that used to own that farm stayed and worked there for my uncle.
Right.
But he was the boss.
Right.
And we stayed there for over a year, and they decided, we all sat around and talked, and they got married there. My uncles both married women,
Were your uncles married before the war?
Yes.
So, did they marry women who were also married before the war?
No, they married, young girls before the war, but then they had families of their own.
Right. Oh, and no one survived?
No one survived.
So the new women that they married, were they also young girls, or were they...
One, my Uncle Herman married a woman who was never married.
Right.
Somebody by the name of Schlesinger, from Schlesinger family.
Right.
And my Uncle Martin also married a woman that was married before and lost a family. Her name was Rappaport.
Right.
But each one of them went to Israel, and each one of them had 2 sons.
Right.
Each one of my uncles.
Did they have a big wedding?
Not really. Very small wedding, just for the rabbi.
How many people were on the farm?
Where I was in Czechoslovakia?
Yeah.
How many people worked on a farm or lived on a farm?
Well, you lived on, I mean, you were living on the farm, right?
Yes. It was me, my two uncles, and their wives, and then they had German workers.
Right. Okay. And what kind of, did you have animals on the farm?
Yeah, we had a considerable amount of animals. We had cows and horses.
Chickens?
And chickens and geese and ducks and pigs. Yeah, pigs, yeah, they had pigs.
I mean, did Jews take care of pigs?
Well, the Jews didn't have to take care of them, but the Germans did.
Right. I mean, did you eat food from the pigs?
I eat now.
But at that time, did you?
No, my Uncle Martin wouldn't do it. Even to this day, it was kosher.
Right. Okay. I mean, did you have a good time on the farm?
Well, we were free. We were able to go to shul. We were not afraid of being Jewish. We sort of took back our identity, and we all had plans to go to Israel.
I mean, how were you emotionally? I mean, you had gone through a pretty traumatic thing, and you lost your whole family. I mean,
to put it nicely, I was all screwed up.
Right.
And sometimes I tell my wife, I think that it left its mark, that I never got well.
Right. I mean, could you trust people, or, I mean, when you would get food, did you hide it, or?
No, I was. Listen, when I was a young kid, maybe 12 or 13 years old, when I was bar mitzvah, my father used to tell me that you're going to get what you give, in life. And there was a lesson that I learned when I was a very young boy. If you want, you have to be a friend first. You have to trust other people and be honorable and be dependable, that you can be trusted. And otherwise, you have to be, if you understand what it means, you have to be a mensch. You know what the definition of a mensch is?
Yep.
You mean to be a decent human being,
Yeah.
And I always believe, I have to treat other people like I want to be treated myself. And we sort of, I started to feel human again, and sort of believing, that not everybody is bad, and there are good people too, and there are a lot of victims like me, millions of victims that, suffered like I did, and some even worse, and life has to go on. We had no control over what
happened. Were you feeling sorry for yourself, or were you moving ahead?
No, I was moving ahead.
Right. Okay.
I was planning at that point already to go to Israel. And
now, you had missed school. Did you?
School. I don't have much of an education, I'm telling you.
Right. So you didn't go back to any schooling?
No.
So you mentioned before, you were thinking, did you want to go to Israel?
I wanted to go to Israel. We all wanted to go to Israel. And I was young, and I was going to join a kibbutz. As a matter of fact, I was going to join the Shomer HaTzair kibbutz and go to Israel. And my two uncles, one of them was very experienced with war and weapons and stuff like that.
Which uncle?
Herman, the one that was in the army.
Right.
So he wanted to go to Israel to fight the British.
Right.
And but it turned out, I had an opportunity to come to this country. So I decided to come here, but they went to Israel, my two uncles.
So why did you have an opportunity to come here?
Why? Because when I was still living with them in Czechoslovakia, we had madrichim. You know what a madrich?
No.
Guides from Israel.
Right.
That came, and they were recruiting young people to go to Israel.
Right.
So I joined that group, the young people, to go to Israel.
Right.
And the madrich, or the guide, in Hebrew they call them madrichim. The guide took us, maybe 20 or 25 young men and women, about my age, a little older, but took us over the border from Czechoslovakia to the American zone.
Right.
To Garbers. I went to this town called Garbers in Germany by Wasserburg.
Right.
In a displaced persons camp. And, we were, given quarters and food and clothes and everything, that you wanted in a displaced person.
Right.
Over there, I found some other relatives already from another village, from Kalnik.
Right. Do you remember their names?
Village. My father's relatives.
Do you remember any of their names or how they were?
I remember all of their names.
What were the names?
Schmiel, Wolf, Zalman.
Right. Were they in camps during the war?
And Rivka.
Right.
And Esther Malka.
Right.
All of them. They were all in camp.
Right.
And they all lost their families. And I met them already. This Madriach, who was formerly in the Israeli army with the British and the Israeli brigade, they took the Jewish kids. They were recruiting us to go to Israel.
Right.
And when we went to, I went to Gabersee by Wasserburg, in that displaced persons camp, that they said that kids or young people under the age of 18, and that if you wanted to leave the camp, you had a choice to go to Australia. As a matter of fact, I had one cousin who went to Australia.
Right.
Or go to England or France or to the United States.
Right.
So, naturally, me and a group wanted to go to the United States. But to go to the United States, there was a wait. You had to wait maybe a couple of months. But if you want to go to Australia, you were able to go the following week.
Right.
And also to go to some other countries that were accepting young, survivors from the Holocaust that were under 18. So I told them that I want to come to the United States. And at that point, my sponsor was going to be the United Jewish Appeal.
Right. Now, how did you decide to just leave your uncles? You didn't have any real family.
They gave me a choice.
Yeah,
to stay with them and eventually go to Israel or go with this Madriach to Israel ahead of him.
Yeah, but why did you make the choice to just leave, to leave them? Weren't you afraid of being,
No, I wasn't afraid.
No.
At that point, I wasn't afraid of anything.
Right. Okay. Okay, so then you went with the Madriach?
Yeah, with this guy to the German-American zone.
Right.
It was...
Were you smuggled?
Yes. Overnight, we crossed the border.
Do you remember anything about that?
No, I remember, going to some point with a train and then getting off and staying like in a place, like in a hotel, and then, at night, maybe 10:30, 11, we were right close to the border. We all assembled.
How many of you were there?
I would say maybe between 15 and 20.
And was it only boys or?
Boys and girls.
Right.
And we came to the American zone, and once we crossed over, he says, "Okay, now you're in Germany," and then we went. We had a choice to go to these different camps.
So you crossed over the border at night?
Yes.
Were you going through the woods or?
Yes, we were going through the woods.
Was this a long trip or?
It wasn't a long trip, maybe an hour.
And how many suitcases did you have with you?
How many? I had one little cardboard suitcase, and I didn't have much in it. I had maybe 2 shirts, an extra pair of pants, and not a little bit, not much.
Right.
I didn't need much.
Okay. So then where were you?
In Gabersee.
Right.
Gabersee by Wasserburg in Germany.
Okay, and then you said you had a choice of places you could go?
Well, first I was going to go to Israel when I first got there.
No,
that was my plan.
Right. Right, okay.
But then, they weren't moving or taking anybody because the English intercepted and put everybody into Cyprus.
Right.
So they weren't really able to go to Israel right away, but if I would have waited there maybe a few more months, I would have been able to go. But I had a choice to come to the United States.
Right. Okay.
Look, I'm going to have to put you on a hold for a minute. I have to go to
the last time we were talking, you arrived in Gabersee?
In the American zone, leaving the Czech Republic. and coming back to the American zone with the intentions of eventually going to Israel.
Right. Okay. And then where did you go?
I stayed in Garbazay for quite a few months.
And what was Garbazay?
It was a displaced person camp, people that were displaced from their homes or had really no place to go, sort of congregated and sort of, assembled in these places, in displaced persons camps. And from there, they went to various places. Some went to Israel, some to the United States and other countries.
So, in this place, did they give you your own apartment, or?
No, they gave me a bed to stay, and then I think that that whole thing used to be a German army camp.
Right.
And they gave me my own bed.
I mean, were you in a room with 50 other people, or with
Yes.
2 other people?
Yes.
50 other people?
Possibly 50 or 60 other people in a big hall.
Okay.
I had my own little space, like everybody else.
Right. I mean, were there any really old people there, or any children?
No children, not at all. But they were all survivors, people that survived, the camps. And
Were there any elderly people there?
there were some, not very old people. I didn't see any old people.
Like 70, 80 years old? No one like that.
No one like that, no.
Right. Okay. And how did you get money when you were there? How did you?
Well, they had these facilities like kitchens where we were able to go and eat, get food like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And they had also people that wanted to be kosher. They had kosher, what they called kosher koch, that we were even able to eat if you wanted, kosher. And also they said they had people that were on details, do various works, at different places. If you wanted to volunteer to go to work with a detail, you were able to do. Or if you didn't want to do anything, you didn't have to do anything. You didn't have to participate in anything special. It was just a sort of a staging area where we waited to go somewhere from there.
Right. I mean, were people doing black market things there, or where you were?
I don't think so. I didn't see anybody, possibly, but not to my knowledge. I didn't really see anybody doing anything, that would label them black marketeers or black market.
And how were the people? I mean, most of these people had lost their families. I mean, were they very down and out, or were they moving ahead in life, or?
Well, they were moving ahead. They were looking forward to a new life, going forward, and I had people from my neighboring village and also some distant relatives that I met there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, you lost your whole family, and you were really able to move ahead in your life.
Well, there were no choices. You really had to, you sort of, like you said, move ahead and look ahead and look to go on living and making some kind of a life for yourself.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That was the objective.
Hey, did you understand at that time that you went through a unique event? That this was...
I understood that all of us, all people in that whole camp, experienced similar or the same or maybe even harder, more hardships. People that lost families, there were, men that lost their wives and their children, and there were young people that lost their fathers and mothers, and, almost everybody, not almost, everybody in the camp suffered.
Right. Did you realize that millions of Jews were killed at that time?
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
okay.
We realized that practically all the Polish Jews and all the European Jews that the Nazis occupied, sort of, they killed off, exterminated or murdered all the Jews.
Did you want to go out and kill Germans, or, I mean, were you...
Yeah, I was very young, and, naturally I hated Germans, but I didn't have that thing in me, that instinct in me to try to murder anybody. You know, it was just that thing that I understand it now. You know, that hate. You know, even now, you know, I'm old. I'm 79, and I look back, and I still have that hate for that German language, and you know, it takes me back, you know, to those days where I look back and I remember, you know, that hostility towards the Jewish people, that hate.
Right. So, do you remember anything else that happened in the DP camp?
Not really. What happened is eventually, you know, I was able to sort of enlist or apply to come to the United States, and I was given a young, like underage minority status because I was under 18, and eventually they moved me and another group to another place, to a place called Prenam Kimze, and they had all young people there, people under, you know, mostly minority, young people that survived. And from there we were able to come to the United States.
Right. So, how long were you there for?
Maybe 2 months, 6 weeks to two months.
I mean, were you learning English there, or?
Not really, just a few words. Not. I didn't go to any school. As a matter of fact, when I was in Gaberzee, you know, they offered, you know, to go to, you know, learn a trade of some kind. But I wasn't there long enough to go to learn any kind of a trade.
So, did someone sponsor you to come to America?
The United Jewish Appeal.
Right. Now, were you very unhappy that you weren't going to Israel, or?
Well, I was happy to come to the United States because at that point, you know, nobody was leaving to go to Israel because the people that left before me wound up in Cyprus.
Right.
In detention by the English.
So you understood that?
Yes.
Right. Now, when you came to America, you went on a boat?
I came on a boat. The name of the boat was Ernie Pyle.
Right, so that was a military boat,
a military boat. I came, and when I came to the New York harbor, I had my uncle's wife, my aunt.
Well, I got some questions about the boat.
Yeah,
now,
okay.
So when you came here, you didn't speak any English?
Not at all.
And how much money did you bring with you?
Maybe $10.
And how many suitcases?
One small cardboard box suitcase.
Right, and what was in that suitcase?
Maybe 2 pair of underwear, a pair of pants, and some socks. A few things that shoot to me, you know, while I was in the DP camp.
Right. Did you know any of the people who were on the ship with you?
Yes.
What were some of their names?
Some of their names, I have to think back.
You don't?
You know, just offhand, I can't.
Right, okay. And was that a difficult trip?
It was a very happy trip. Very happy. I remember being very happy and sort of very excited, you know, that I'm coming to the United States. And as a matter of fact, when I was interviewed, I told them that I had an uncle in the United States. My father's brother was living here, and they visited him from the UJA, for United Jewish Appeal, and he gave them back the money for my trip. He gave them back, I think it was $140 some odd in those days, because he had a receipt for that money. And when I came into New York Harbor, he was able to get me. I was able to go to his house.
Right. So how many days was the trip?
The trip was, I think, about 7 or 8 days.
And you arrived in New York?
In New York,
During
yes.
the daytime or at night?
At night.
At night? So how did he know?
He didn't. We didn't get off the boat till the next day.
Oh, okay. Do you remember seeing the Statue of Liberty?
Yes, yes.
And how did that feel?
It was beautiful. It was exciting, beautiful. It was, I don't know how to describe it, but it's just a wonderful, wonderful, a very exciting.
Was everyone on the boat survivors?
Yes.
Okay, and then, so your uncle met you?
No, my uncle's wife.
Okay, what was her name?
Gussie.
Gussie?
Gussie, yes.
Do you remember her last name?
Well, she was married to my uncle. Her name was Gussie Berkovits.
Berkovits. Oh, right. Okay. Had you ever met her before?
No,
So how did you recognize each other?
I didn't. They called my name, and when I came to the gates where my name was called, she walked up to me and she says to me in Yiddish, she says to me, "Berleiser," and I says, "Yeah." She says, "Ich bin dein Vaters or dein Uncle's Schwab, Gussie." So I says, "Where is my uncle? Wie is my uncle?" So she told me that uncle had gemisgein to der Arbeit. He had to go to work.
Right.
So I said, okay, in Yiddish. It was strictly Yiddish because I didn't speak any English. So she took me to a bus, and then she took me to the subway, and they lived in the Bronx.
Where?
On Teller Avenue.
Right.
And 165th Street.
Right. Were they wealthy people?
No, they were poor people. Not poor, but they were working people.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And my uncle had a job, and he belonged to the union, and he made a living.
Had you ever met your uncle before?
No. He came to this country before I was born.
Right. Mm-hmm.
He was my father's older brother.
Right. So what was his name?
His name was Sam, or Shloime Zalman.
Right.
Shloime.
So was that a very emotional meeting when you met him?
It was a very exciting meeting. Very exciting meeting.
Right.
It was a very emotional meeting, and actually, he knew because I came in 1948. That was like 3 years really after the war, and he had already brought out his surviving son. He had his own son that survived.
What was his name?
Itzik.
Right.
Irving. And when I came here, his son was living in Chicago already. He came to New York, but eventually he settled in Chicago.
What was he doing for work in Chicago?
Well, he was he was an electrician.
Right. Okay. And so you stayed with them in the Bronx?
I stayed with my uncle in the Bronx.
Did you have your own bedroom there?
Yes. They gave me my own room, and
so when you came here, what did you see that you never saw before?
well, I've seen.
I mean, do you ever see tall buildings like that, or
No.
or a subway?
No, I never seen a subway, and I never seen tall buildings like this.
Right.
You know, when I seen one of these tall buildings, I thought that they could the whole Czechoslovakia into one building.
And all the oranges and bananas you could eat?
Everything, all these things that you're mentioning, the oranges, the bananas, and candy, and food, and all the goodies, everything. And the first week that I was here, my uncle took me to Robert Hall, and he brought me a suit of clothes and a couple of pants and some clothes and shirts, and then he took me to McCann's shoes, and he brought me a couple of pair of shoes, and he took me to the barber shop, and he gave me a haircut, and he must have spent a couple of $100 on me.
Really?
He took me then that weekend, and it was really something.
Was he asking you a ton of questions about what happened during the war?
Well, he knew already from his son. He knew more or less, he knew everything, because Itzik was here like a year before I got here, and he lived with him for a while, so he knew everything. But naturally, he was my father's oldest brother. I never seen him. He never seen me. And he tried to take care of me and help me.
Right. Okay. And so, I mean, did you go to school here or did you work?
Yes, I went to school. I went to night school.
Where?
On University Avenue in the Bronx, University and Tremont Avenue, to learn how to speak the language.
Right.
So I took a bus. At that time, no, it was no bus. It was a trolley car. And I went to school in the evening. I went to evening school every night for a couple hours.
Oh, okay. And did you work in the beginning?
Yes.
How did you get your first job?
He got it for me. My uncle had a stepson who was a master plumber, and he wanted me to learn the plumbing trade because he was telling me that I don't have an education or didn't go to school or anything like that, that the only way to make a living is learn a trade. And he told me to learn any kind of a trade, become a mechanic, a carpenter, a plumber, but he says he had the opportunity to get me a job with his son.
Right. What was his name? Do you remember?
Marty Fried, and he's still living.
Right. Okay. So what did you work like as a plumber's assistant, or?
I worked as a helper, an assistant to him,
Right.
for maybe 7 or 8 months.
Didn't you have to be part of a union, or?
I didn't belong to the union. The union wouldn't take me in. But eventually...
Why wouldn't they take you in?
Because they had a closed union. It was father and son.
Right.
If your father belonged to the union, they would take the son in.
Right.
And the same thing happened with the electricians union.
Right.
It was strictly a father and son. He tried to get me in. He took me to the union hall several times and tried to get me in, but they just put my name on a list, and they wouldn't, take me in. But eventually, he took me to the jobs anyway. But due to the fact that I was a survivor and came, after the war and had lost the family, the union, a lot of these shop chairmen overlooked the fact that I was not a union man.
Right.
But eventually, they took me off the job.
Right.
They told me he couldn't work unless I belonged to the union.
But how much money were you making in the beginning?
That's a hard question. I think I was making like maybe $30 a week.
Right. Mm-hmm. And, okay, and then what happened?
Then, after being here for a year, I joined the Army. I went into a recruiting station by constantly, seeing the Army advertise, that they'll teach you a trade and you'll have a chance to better yourself and do. So I walked into a recruiting station and I joined the Army for 3 years.
I mean, didn't you have enough excitement in the Holocaust?
Well, the Army was not excitement. It was a peacetime Army.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay. Right.
There was no wars going on, and it was very nice before the war started, before the Korean War started.
Right.
I had a very nice life in the Army. They gave you food, exercise, clean clothes. They paid you, and you had a chance to really assimilate, to become part of the American dream.
And where were you in the Army?
First, I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey, for basic training.
Right.
And I was there for 12 weeks.
Did you meet any other survivors there?
No.
No.
I was the only one. As a matter of fact, I was the only Jew in my